All right, so we are now recording the meeting. So again, welcome back. Thank you for coming back to session number 2. This is going to be about anger, the connections to stress and mental fitness. So we're going to be talking about those 3 things together. So today we're going to do a review from last week. We're going to talk about the connection between anger and stress. Then we're going to talk about the anger mountain. And this, I think, is going to be very visual for some of you, or very kinesthetic. I think that we all have at one point felt ourselves climbing up the anger mountain, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the mental health continuum, and then we're going to talk about how to strengthen your mental fitness. So again, just before we get started, I do have a furry dog pet friend in my office, and sometimes she needs to get out, and that will be probably the only time I'll be disturbed, if I'll be disturbed. So I apologize for that in advance. So thank you for accepting that. All right, so I'm going to put on the chat so now I can see the chat box. In a review of anger, what do you remember about anger? What is anger? What are some of the things that you remember me saying about anger, or that maybe have come to your mind over the last week? Anyone? Oh, okay, great. It's an emotion, it's a behavior. Excellent. Anger is a choice. Okay, excellent. It can be positive if used correctly. Great, yes, right. We saw that anger could be positive or negative. Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you for those answers. Those are great. All right, that'll be a great way to get us started here. So, anger is an emotion. It's a normal emotion. It's an important emotion. But it varies in intensity, duration, and frequency, right? So we saw that some people get so angry they see red or they stop thinking. For some people, it's the duration. It lasts a long time. Anger can be a motivator. Yes, thank you for that. And for some people, anger is very frequent. All right, so accompanied by physiological changes, right? And we saw those as being all of the things we see in the fight or flight response. So your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, you start to sweat, your blood goes into your muscles, etc. And excellent, it signals that there's a problem to solve, right? That is absolutely true, especially when you stop and think about it. But the key point is don't expect to never feel angry, but focus is on what we think, say, and do after we feel angry. Okay, and it's just excellent. It's a great segue, natural, normal, and signals that there's a problem that needs to be solved. Another review was the perception, and this may or may not have been interesting for you over the last week if you took time to think about how we collect information through all of our senses, and this data gets filtered through our own experiences and results in what we believe to be true. Remembering that the next person beside you or the person in front of you also believes what they are feeling or seeing or experiencing is their truth. So it is very interesting to see that when you're in the same situation, 2 people can see it very differently. All right, why do we get angry? Do you remember? Why do we get angry? Why are some things that make us angry? Or why do we choose to get angry based on some of the things that we see? Right? A misinterpretation, yes. Expectations, typically disappointment in expectations, right? Not having our expectations met, exactly, perfect. We get triggered. Yes, we're going to talk about triggers today a lot. So those are excellent answers, right? We respond to a perceived threat, right? We see something that might trigger us or that make us feel threatened, whether that's physically, emotionally, internally, externally. Hold on, somebody's admitting. So the importance that you place on a person, event, or situation, right? So when we talk about some things that we place importance on, so we place importance on things like respect, ethics, cleanliness, time management. So if someone sort of on the other side of this situation doesn't feel the same way about being on time or making sure that the kitchen is clean, etc., then that might make us feel angry, right? Unmet expectations, we talked about that. Disappointment, we place a lot of expectations on people, and we have high expectations for ourselves, and we expect other people to be like that and often get disappointed when they're not. Sometimes we feel angry, but it's actually another emotion. Maybe sometimes we feel hurt, or we feel embarrassed or frustrated. Sometimes we're scared, fear. So we have a lot of stress in our lives, and we're not doing stress management regularly. So oftentimes when you think about when we get angry, or if we start getting angry more often than not, it's typically because there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things going on in our lives. We have a short fuse. We are feeling overwhelmed maybe. And these are some of the things that will cause us to go straight to anger. Anger is an emotion of choice when we are feeling very stressed. So last week we also saw this particular thinking skills model. So we saw that in our everyday life, right? Every situation will lead to thoughts. And those thoughts, whether we choose to make them negative or positive, our thoughts are sometimes habitual, right? So those thoughts are going to lead us to have emotions and physical sensations about what we are seeing, about what we are living in this situation. Remembering that the example we gave last week, when we're in a situation, let's say, for example, when I told my husband to go get my son's blue shirt and he didn't come down with the shirt in his hand. So my thoughts could have gone negative. You know, he never listens to me. He does it on purpose to make me late. He has no idea what he's doing, blah, blah, blah. Or I could say, oh, maybe he didn't hear me, or maybe he didn't know what blue shirt to bring down, etc. So our responses, our emotions, and our physical sensations will be different based on our own thoughts. And what's interesting is we don't typically think we have control over our thoughts, but we do. We tell ourselves a story, even though at that moment we don't know that. And that leads to a behavior. And that behavior is what we have control over, right? When we talk about our actions, our actions and our responses, right? We have control over those things. So a review of coping thoughts, when we have those negative thoughts, coping thoughts will decrease an emotional response and physiological sensations and actions. So it allows for a calm response to a stressful situation, right? So that coping thought was, oh, maybe he didn't hear me. Maybe he didn't know what blue shirt. So when we talk about any type of situation, somebody placing a dirty dish on the counter, maybe they don't know that I like it in the dishwasher. Maybe they don't have the same priority of cleanliness as I do. You know, in traffic, when there's a slow driver on the left lane, maybe they're just not aware of the rules or whatever that might be. So sometimes we can just ask ourselves, is this really worth getting mad over? And oftentimes when we're angry, it's something that we have gotten used to doing or saying, or we get angry at the same thing over and over again, or we get angry over a little thing that is really not significant and it can lead to more. But sometimes ask yourself, you know, is this really worth getting angry over? I'm stuck in traffic and I can't do anything about it. Is angry really going to help me? Right? Sometimes not. We must have different priorities, especially when it comes to, it could be work, it could be family related, it could be cleanliness, time management, those kinds of things, right? When we talk about someone prioritizes maybe their time over work, or they prioritize playtime versus, you know, family time, or whatever that might be, right? Different priorities. Asking yourself also, why is this triggering me? What belief is being challenged right now? What story am I telling myself? Why am I telling myself a negative story? Could I see it a different way? Okay. Sometimes they're not angry at me, they're angry at the situation. So sometimes if you're in a situation where someone is attacking you or yelling at you or being upset with you, sometimes it's really not about you. It's really that they are either venting or they're expressing their anger, right, on you, their behavior on you, and asking yourself, what do I have control over in this situation? And that particular one is my favorite one, and that might answer your question, Richard. What is the best way to respond to road rage? Is this if you are having road rage, or if someone in your area or your vicinity is having road rage? And sometimes it could be, you know, what can I do in this situation, right? Could I just maybe pull over to the right and let them pass? Or if it's yourself having road rage, you know, what's really the worst thing that can happen if somebody cuts you off? Maybe they're in a rush, right? Maybe they are new drivers. Maybe they didn't see you, right? That happens sometimes. Maybe everybody's distressed and their fuse is really small, and that's typically when they're in the orange or the red, and we're going to see that. Road rage is something that is dangerous, especially because it can cause a lot of traffic issues, right? Or we also feel threatened, right? When we talk about how we're perceiving a situation, when we're in our cars and someone cuts us off or someone does something that makes us nervous or scared, right? Scare and fear could be the same thing. We feel attacked, right? So our perceived, there's a perceived threat on our safety. And so that, if that's obviously it's a huge belief, right, to feel safe. We believe we should feel safe, and that's totally fair. So a lot of the times it's the trigger that will cause that you're perceiving that someone's attacking your safety. Okay, I don't know if that helps, but it depends on what situation you're in or what part of it you're in. All right, so now let's get into the nitty-gritty. Actually, before we move on, any questions about what we saw last week or this week, or has anybody sort of had any epiphanies over the last week based on some of the things that maybe we talked about? And I mean, you're welcome to put them in the chat or not, but sometimes it's fun to think about, you know, what did I change this week, or what behaviors or what thoughts changed this week based on some of the things that I learned? Or maybe there's an epiphany today based on, you know, maybe some of the things you were thinking about. Okay, so let's talk about, yes, to really think before reach out in anger. Well, that's really great. Sometimes just to stop and give yourself a few seconds to think about why you're getting angry or about getting angry. You know, what should I say or what should I do? How can I see this differently? That's really great. Really stopping and thinking about it is probably the best thing we can do, because we are probably having a habitual thought that is triggering us, or maybe we're seeing the situation differently. So I love that you're stopping to think. So let's talk about the connections between anger and stress. If I were to ask you, what's the connection between anger and stress? What would you respond? What are some of your thoughts on that? And this is an interesting connection, right? When we think about they can both cause tension. Yes, right? You have a limited capacity. Anger is a consequence of stress, psychological pressures. Yes, those are all great answers. People tend to be short. Yes, when they're under stress. When you don't have an outlet or anger in response to stress, these are beautiful answers. Thank you guys. I love them, because it's really true. They are very, very connected. Because when we think about stress, we saw, let's look at what stress is. Oops. Let's talk about how we can define stress. They both are reactions to situations, fuel for the fire, yes, right? So it's our body response to any stimulus or demand, and it's an automatic response, right? When we talked about anger and being triggered, right, we can see that those physiological changes are automatic when we're angry. So it's the same thing with stress, right? Our pressure exceeds our perceived ability to cope. So when we look at feeling, let's say, attacked when you're in road rage, for example, right? There's somebody who's driving dangerously, and we perceive that we're not able to cope with that. We feel stuck maybe, right? Or pressure exceeds our perceived ability to cope with whatever it is that's happening. Maybe we're feeling overwhelmed and there's one more thing that happens. So our body will respond in a stress response. But we also know, just like with anger, can be positive or negative. When we talk about positive stress, or when we talk about stress being more of a challenge, and we see it more of a positive energy, our responses or our actions are giving us the energy to conquer this particular challenge, right? That's positive. The body will react the same way, except that your blood pressure won't increase, so your arteries are going to stay relaxed. Whereas when we're in distress, we're going to feel the same way, except that our heart rate or our blood pressure is going to increase because the arteries contract, they constrict. Okay, so when we see it as positive, or when we choose to see it as a challenge as opposed to an attack, our physiological body actually can sense the difference. So this particular reaction is called a fight, flight, or freeze response, right? We've seen this. So our fight, flight, or freeze response will be activated when we perceive a threat. It gives us alertness. So we're ready to fight or run away. And that's because of the surge of adrenaline that happens, and other hormones like cortisol enter our bloodstream. So the increased sense of power and strength due to the physiological changes that adrenaline brings on. The adrenaline will move all of your blood into your muscles so that you are ready to fight or flight. And so because of that, there's less blood in your brain and in your internal organs. So when we're not thinking clearly, our empathy for others and vulnerable feelings rapidly diminish. That's why when we're angry, we say or do things that we typically often regret later, or we don't care that we, yell at somebody or call them a name, because our empathy has gone basically into our muscles. And that's why sometimes we feel like a Hulk, or we've heard of stories where parents will run out into the street and lift a car off of their child. That's the adrenaline, that's that fight or flight response. And what was important when we were, I guess, cave people, right, back in the day, this response was really important for survival. But the problem is that we haven't adapted to not having any attacks by saber-toothed tigers at this point. So our bodies respond the same, even though our attack is different. So this is really a basal sort of physiological response. So we get this now with traffic, or we get this with work deadlines, as opposed to being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. The difference is that when we were chased by a saber-toothed tiger, we could hide in a cave for a little while, and the tiger will eventually go away. Or we have killed the saber-toothed tiger and we bring it back to our cave or tribe or family or whatever, and then we're able to eat and relax for the next few weeks because we have food and but when we have traffic and deadlines and COVID and feeding kids and going to work and all of the things that are happening at once, we can't hide in a cave for a couple of weeks to relax and resolve these situations. So it starts to add up. So what's the connection to stress then? Well, that fight, when we feel like we want to fight, we feel challenged, but we're still in control. Okay, so that's just the adrenaline part. When we want to flight, we feel a little bit of a loss of control. And so we have more anxiety, right? We want to run away from the problem. When freeze happens, it's because of a feeling of prolonged stress. We feel distressed, and that's when cortisol is released. We feel, again, that the pressure exceeds our perceived ability to cope. Okay. So anger as a signal of stress. Anger is an emotional signal that lets us know that we're experiencing too much stress. So if you thought over the last week, if you had an angry moment or an angry outburst or something like that, were you feeling at that time maybe more stress than usual? Or when you, oh dear, yeah, that sounds horrible. When you maybe are tired or hungry or your husband's gone and it's minus 40 degrees and the pipes are freezing, right? There's a little bit of stress there. And so we feel that, you know, we're at that shorter fuse part, and anger becomes our emotion of choice. Now, stress is feeling experienced when it's perceived that demands exceed our perceived ability to cope, right? And a stressor is an external situation or internal thought that requires a coping behavior. And that's something you need to change, right? So our coping behavior is something that we need to start having control over. What do we typically do? Do we typically yell? Do we typically hide and kind of become a turtle? Do we go for a run? What do we do? So our behavior is something that we need to start changing. Now, when we talk about how do we know when we are starting to get angry, if you think about what physical sensations do you start to have, and some people have different different feelings, but what physical sensations do you feel inside your own body when you start to feel angry? Can you think about what responses or what your body does when you start to feel angry? You start to feel warm, hot, sweating, yep, right? So we're physically aware of what our body is doing. Your heart rate goes up, right? Pounding, tensions. So these are all things that are important to be aware. Oh, clenching, yes, right? Sometimes teeth grinding, sometimes people get headaches, muscle aches, sometimes people get stomach issues. So these physical sensations, oh, shaking, that's when you're at the very sort of end of your rope there. Oh, attention is focused. Yes, right? You kind of see one thing. So these are all really important to know because you are then aware that you are going to be climbing up that anger mountain. So we're going to talk about the 5 stages of the anger mountain. And this is really important to, to think about, because we're going to talk about at what point do you need to take a step back and think before you react, right? Okay, I like this. This is very honest. I tend to skip those and just snap and flip my lid. I go from 0 to 60. And that's very normal. And that's probably become a habitual response, right? And this is something that if you want to change that you need to step back and think about what it is that's making you so angry, or what it is that is causing that to trigger so quickly. Is there a different way of doing it? So when we look at the 5 stages of the anger mountain, we're going to talk about the trigger, what that trigger might be. We're going to talk about the escalation period and how your body is starting to prepare for the crisis. The crisis is the point at which you flip your lid or say something or do something. It's the crisis point. From that point, it's almost like a release and you start to cool down. So you have hit the peak and then you're starting to cool down. Blood is starting to come back to your brain. And then sometimes there's a depression because you have used up so much energy in this anger mountain that you go right to below the energy level at which you started. So let's take a look at that. So when we look at the anger mountain, look at the top part. It's called the angry arousal. And the bottom part is thinking. So imagine that the higher you climb, the less thinking you do. Okay, so can anybody sort of place this in a situation that you've been in and you've actually felt this happen, where you stop thinking or you say or do things at the point of this crisis where you're like, oh, that's why I don't remember, or that's why I stopped thinking, or that's why I said that, because that's not normally something that I say or do, right? So when we look at the trigger is when we feel attacked. Now, remember that sort of back in the day, that used to be an animal that was actually physically attacking us, right? But now it could be anything around us that makes us feel threatened, okay? And we feel emotionally, psychologically, or physically challenged. And we assess the situation and prepare for this challenge. So the trigger, you haven't said anything yet or done anything yet, but you have perceived something that feels like an attack, and now your body needs to prepare. And as your body prepares, that's the escalation. It prepares for the crisis, whatever it needs to do. Does it need to run away? Does it need to defend itself? Does it need to take a deep breath and step back? Oh dear, dealing with a narcissist. There's probably very few things that are worse than that. Now, at this point, the escalation period is when the body pumps adrenaline in for the attack. And that's when your heart rate increases, and that's when your blood pressure increases, and that's when your blood rushes away from your brain and into your muscles because you are ready to fight. Now, look here, this is when a timeout should happen. Now, the reason I asked you what you felt when you get angry, it's because you have to become aware that your body is preparing, and so you can step away from whatever situation is happening before you hit your crisis point. And that's when you want to make sure that you try to avoid what you say or do at this crisis point. Now, also knowing that the more often you go up anger mountain, the harder it is on your body, right? Which can cause a lot of sort of physiological challenges, right? It can start to affect your mental health and physical health and your overall well-being. But this is, again, the escalation period is when your body tells you you are starting to build, step away from the situation, okay? So the crisis point, the body has maximized its preparation and chemical command is issued, unable to listen, think, or have empathy, right? This is when you say or do things that you regret later, that you probably don't feel proud of, right? Especially because you're not thinking. So when I talk about a timeout, this is what it looks like. This is when you take a step back from the situation and you take time to think about what you want to do next. Because a lot of the times I feel that our reactions, responses, words can be hurtful, and they're habitual, right? There's something that we've gotten into the habit of doing or saying regularly. So when we step out, when we take a time out, we use a coping thought so that we can actually have a calmer response, right? Step back. What am I thinking? Why is this triggering me? What about this situation is causing me to, to build my blood pressure or go up this anger mountain? Because then you can go back and deal with the problem. Remember, anger is telling you that there's a problem that needs to be solved. And that problem is what is causing you to feel angry, right? The other person might not see it that way, or they might not understand. They might not really even know why you're so upset, right? Have you ever been asked, like, why are you so angry about this? And you actually have to stop and think about it. Now, the rules of a timeout is you have to almost tell the other person when you're calm at a completely different time. Yesterday when I got really upset, well, let's try a timeout every time we get angry so that we don't end up, saying mean things to each other. So the rules are, when I put my hands together like this, right, like a timeout, I'm going to step away for 20 minutes. I'm going to go out for a walk, and then we'll reconvene. Every time out needs a time in, but you do not follow the person when they say time out, right? This is where you both have to step away. You both have to agree to step away. Then you both have to agree to come back. Okay, those are the rules of the timeout. So after that crisis point, right, your body cools down and recovers from the energy expenditure, and the quality of judgment returns. So now blood is coming back to your head and back into your digestive system and stuff like that. So now you're going back to almost sort of normal state, except that because you have used so much energy climbing that anger mountain, that your body enters a period when adrenaline and heart rate dip below normal. So you might feel exhausted, your awareness returns. Assessment of behavior often leads to guilt or regret. So if this happens often and you can sort of feel it or see it in your head, during that escalation period when your body is talking to you, take a moment to step back. Take a moment to stop and think, I'm just going to step away before I get even more upset or before I yell at you again or whatever, because I need to find a different way of dealing with this situation, because clearly yelling isn't working, or clearly, saying things or doing things are hurting this relationship. So how can I fix it? How can I make the situation so that it doesn't trigger me? Right? How can I solve the problem that's happening? So when we think about, some people, again, get irate when there's, mess left in the kitchen and get completely angry. The trigger could be, they disrespect me, they don't care that I'm cleaning up, they are slobs, blah, 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 right? Those are trigger thoughts. But a calm response might be, right, maybe they were in a rush, maybe they had other priorities, maybe they had to go off to school and the bus was coming, maybe they had to, whatever, maybe they just don't have the same priorities, maybe they just don't care much about cleanliness, and if you're going to do it anyways, then why would they do it, right? So it's very interesting to stop and think about what the actual problem is. So when we talk about mental fitness, and we talk about, when we're stressed and our fuse is very short and we go to anger, that means our mental fitness is maybe being a little bit challenged. But if I were to ask you then, what is mental fitness? What does that mean to you? We know what physical fitness is. Have we ever stopped to think about what mental fitness might be? And it's oftentimes when we think about, why am I feeling so stressed? What kinds of things can I do to help the stress level decrease? Oh, adaptability, great, yes, right? When we can adapt to change, being able to respond calmly to a situation, being mindful of how you're feeling, those are all really great answers, right? Absolutely. Knowledge, yes, great, right? These are really great answers. Mental fitness is all of those things, right? Resiliency, yes, right? So mental fitness is to be psychologically and emotionally resilient, right? To be able to spring back after struggling through difficult and stressful times. So when we talk about, resiliency, or when we talk about springing back, this doesn't mean right away, but this means that you have grown and you have developed coping skills and you're able to move forward because you are doing something that's helping you become psychologically and emotionally more resilient, right? You're able to take on a little bit more. You have a little bit more maybe energy. Maybe you've asked for help. So you have learned to cope. Maybe you have done more self-care so that you're able to grow and develop and learn from these situations and move forward and see how they can help you in the next situation. And we have put a lot of mental health in the forefront. So now we know that we used to say mental health you can't really see, so you don't really know when someone's not doing well. But there's been a lot of research done on behaviors that will show up when someone is starting to slip down the mental health continuum. And this is something that's really important because you will maybe notice in yourself or in others when your behavior or your sleep patterns or your social interactions start to change. And it's sort of in 4 columns, which is really interesting. The healthy is the green. This is where we aim to be. This is where we all sort of feel our best and we have good mood fluctuations and we sleep well and we're physically well, etc. And then yellow is when we slide into maybe having a bad day. Maybe we're feeling a little bit more overwhelmed, or maybe we feel impatient or irritable. Maybe we're having trouble sleeping. There's, some things going on that we maybe can't stop thinking about, or maybe are causing us some distress. We maybe have more muscle tension or headaches, and we don't really want to socialize anymore, or as much as before anyways. And maybe instead of having a glass of wine, once at dinner on Saturday night or Sunday night or whatever, now it becomes a little bit more regular. Oh, I really want to have a glass of wine or a glass of beer. or a shot of whiskey or whatever every night. And it becomes something part of, it's the only thing that kind of helps me. Sometimes there's negative coping mechanisms that start to happen. And a lot of us are aware when we're in this particular column, and we can maybe place ourselves or look at some of these behaviors that maybe we're doing a little bit more than we used to. I know that sometimes when I feel a little bit more distressed, forgetfulness is something that really stands out for me. I forget, what I was doing in the last room when I came into this room, or I forget where I put my keys or my phone or my shoes, or, all of these different things is my body telling me. Brain fog is definitely one of them. Or we become more irritable and less patient with people around us, right? We become, some of us become sarcastic, right? Some of us become more quiet. So this is where your body is telling you that you're starting to slip down the mental health continuum. Your mental health is starting to struggle here. And if you're not going to do anything about it or take care of yourself so that you can get back to green, you might slide into the injured phase. And that becomes your new normal. And I like this expression, the hamster is continuously turning in your head, right? We kind of go through these thoughts over and over. And for some, it's at night, especially, right? When you can't stop thinking. And the injured phase and the orange phase is a phase where we have become so numb to feeling negative or not feeling good that this becomes our new normal. We don't know that we're there. Other people who are in this particular column don't know that they're there, and they react a lot more negatively. Maybe they start to feel hopeless. Their work performance starts to decrease. Anger becomes an emotion of choice. Now sleep is very, very disturbed. Maybe there's nightmares. There's constant aches and pains, increased fatigue. And now there's avoidance and withdrawal. And perhaps now there's a lot more sort of negative coping mechanisms, whether that's alcohol, drugs, Advil because you're always sore, maybe it's gaming, maybe it's whatever it is that's the negative escape part. So what's interesting about this orange phase is, like I said, you're not aware that you're there. Yet you can stay there for quite a long time. And sometimes someone else has to reach out and notice. I've noticed that you are very negative lately, or that you are always tired looking. And this is really where we can place or pick up on things that people are saying or doing. Because if we stay in this orange too long, it's easy to slide into the ill phase where someone were to get, I guess, a diagnosable mental health injury. And this is something that's where it's going to take a lot longer to increase your resiliency, to improve your mental health, to slide back down into the healthy. So basically when we talk about, this health continuum, if you were to imagine it on a physical scale, green is when you're running and having a great jog, you're in the zone. Reacting is when you twist your ankle on a rock. And this is where you can decide, do I stop, put my foot up, put some ice, and I can go back to in the green in a couple of days, right? Sometimes you just have to stop and rest and take care of whatever it is that's ailing you. Or you can choose to continue running on this twisted ankle, and it becomes normal for you to feel pain and discomfort, and you start to become numb to the pain, and you're running on this painful ankle. Maybe you're starting to micro tear your ligaments, right? You're causing damage inside, internally, but you're so numb, I don't have time to fix it. I'm just going to keep moving forward. I'm not going to stop and look after myself because I don't have time, or I don't care to, or I don't know how to. And this is where at one point you might have a severed Achilles tendon because your body just couldn't hold on anymore. And this is where you need medical intervention. You're going to need surgery. You're going to need physiotherapy. It's just going to take a lot longer to get back to healthy. And so very important to think that when we are feeling angry, and that's not normally something that we feel on a regular basis or that we have in the past, know that there's something happening. We are not maybe looking after our mental health or our physical health as well as we should be. or maybe we're not taking the time to, or maybe we're letting a lot of things accumulate over time. And we need to do something because nobody else can change our mental health. We have to take ourselves in our own hands and say, I don't want to feel like this anymore. What can I do to help myself change or get back down into the yellow and the green? Okay, so that's when we talk about where does anger come from? How does stress get involved? This is really where we can place it all in one graph or one slide to say, your body's talking to you all the time. And when we don't manage our stress and our fuse gets shorter and shorter and our body starts to throw in all of this cortisol that takes a toll on our physical body, it also has a toll on our mental body. So how can we improve our mental fitness? Write something maybe in the chat that you do to improve your mental fitness, or what do you do to manage mental health? Exercise is a great one, right? That's for your medical or physical body. You read books, great. Meditation, those are all wonderful things. Meditation, yoga, great, excellent. Physical activity outside, right? Sometimes outside helps just to get some fresh air. So I love that maybe those of you that put something in the chat, you know what you do and you do it regularly. Quiet time, walking the dog, that's my favorite as well. Now, are there any of you that don't know what you do to improve your mental health or aren't doing anything right now to improve your mental health? Because that actually might be a problem, right? When we don't do or we don't take the time to look after ourselves, that's when we really can start down, sliding down that slippery slope. So there's going to be three major things. Seem to dwell on problems, yeah, and that's really hard on your mental health, right? Now, when we talk about what are some things that we can do, there's three main things, and those are sort of like the three things you need to start with, because otherwise the rest won't not necessarily be significant, but it won't be as significant on your health. So the first thing is sleep. You need to make sure that you are getting a good amount of sleep, that you're getting good quality sleep, that you're getting at least 7 hours a night or most nights of the week, because sleep is probably the most important nutrient you can give your body. Sleep is when your body repairs. Sleep is when your body recovers, builds muscle, consolidates to memory. Sleep manages your mood, and sleep is just something that sometimes we don't do enough of or we don't take seriously, but sleep is very important. The next thing is physical activity. And physical activity, for some of you, is your self-care. But physical activity is important for strengthening your posture, your core muscles. It helps with moving the blood around your body. But when you think about physical activity, your body gets warm, you sweat, you start to, your heart rate goes up. All of the things that are the same reactions and responses as the stress response or as the stress response. So people who are physically active and who have almost trained their bodies to feel stress coming on and let it release, feel stress as less intense. So people who are more physically active don't have the same intensity of the stress response as people who are not physically fit. So another really great reason to be physically active. And proper nutrition. We actually have a whole webinar on the connection between your nutrition and your mental health. There's a huge connection. Basically, right now is when you eat better, you feel better, and that's just a normal, thing to imagine. But there's a huge connection. So eating well. Those are the top three things that you need to do to make sure that you're improving your mental fitness. Everything else is excellent, and it's a bonus. And when we talk about stress management, what kinds of self-care things do you do, right? Sometimes it's people were saying walking, reading, yoga, meditation, some for painting. Some of you have an artistic side, but there's a stress management component, right? When we talk about mental fitness. Healthy communication, right? For some of you, it might just be that there's always a misunderstanding or there's a perceived attack by somebody that Maybe you just need to talk it out. Maybe they're seeing things completely differently, or they're understanding you differently. Oh, musical instrument, excellent, right? Anything that's creative. So communication is also really important, but also sometimes talking to somebody about what's bothering you, getting it off of your chest and releasing some of that intensity. We have mental fitness exercise, and that's where sort of yoga, meditation, mindfulness kind of come into play. And we have a change in our perspectives, right? How can we change our thought process? So let's talk about that. We're going to focus on things that we can control in our situation. So here's the personal power grid, and this is something that's very important when it comes to learning about how to manage our control, our situation. So in every situation, we have control over certain things, and we have no control over certain things. Now, as a general rule, hold on, let me just let my dog out. As a general rule, what is the only thing typically in a situation that you have control over? What do you think? There's one really good answer. Yourself, your reactions, your response. Excellent, perfect. Now, what is it that you don't have control over? Typically. Pretty much everything else, right? Other people, yep, everybody, others, the environment, right? So when we take something into sort of consideration, every situation that we're in. So let's talk about mastery. When we are in a situation and we take action over that particular situation, because that's something that we have control over. So when we talk about getting healthier, for example, improving our mental health, things we have control over, whether we choose to exercise or not, whether we choose to eat better or not, whether we choose to sleep better or not, right? Whether we do any type of mental health exercise, whether we do some stress management exercises. So when we're in control and we take action, we feel a sense of mastery, which is why in every situation you can ask yourself, what do I have control over, right? I can control my thoughts, my reactions, my actions, myself. So when we are in a situation where we have no control over certain things, and we have decided to let them go. We have decided to accept that certain things are the way they are, and we have to accept and let them go. Otherwise, it's going to cause us a lot more stress. So acceptance is, COVID is here and we can't socialize and we can't go to gyms and we can't go to restaurants. We could be really angry at those things and hang on to things that we can't control and be angry about them all the time. But those things aren't going to change no matter how angry we are about them, right? For sometimes we just have to accept that things are the way they are and genuinely let them go. It's almost like lifting a boulder off of your shoulders. You no longer need to worry about these things because even if you do worry about them, you can't change them. So you have to find a way in your control to see them differently, to react to them differently. And when you talk about sort of, again, like other people, when we talk about certain situations or events, they're not accepting the infidelity. You're accepting that that person is incapable of maybe loyalty, right? So do you, in your control, decide, do I stay with this person? Do I leave this person? Do I talk to this person? Do I not talk to this person? So this is where you have control. It's not about accepting what's wrong. It's accepting that certain people or certain events that you can't change, that it's already happened, right? So when we talk about when it comes to anything, right? When we talk about traffic or exercise or getting healthier or deciding to accept a person the way they are, whether we choose to stay with them or not, right? And this is where sort of even in my situation where my husband works in a restaurant and every time he said, I'll be home at a certain time, he was never home at that time. And so I would hang on to the time that he said that he was going to be home. But after being angry for a couple of years, I decided, well, I need to accept that when he says a certain time, that I have to add an hour or two to that particular thing so that I don't get angry. So that was I have control over my expectations, right? We have control over our expectations. Sometimes we're not aware that we are, but we are. So this is I'm going to say, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get the gist, but when we ask ourselves in situations, let's say even just getting healthier, right? I have control over if I exercise, if I eat properly, if I sleep properly, right? Those are the main things. What are some things that I have to accept and let go of that I cannot change? Well, I'm getting older, my genetics maybe, the fact that gyms are closed. These are some of the things that I have to accept and let go of, because being angry at these particular things isn't going to change it, right? I have to change my perception. So my perception is, if gyms are closed, then my mastery, I can control that I'm going to work out at home. Or I'm going to accept that, I can hang on that it's winter outside and I'm upset that the weather's bad, but I can accept that it's winter, and maybe in my control, I say I'm going to get better winter clothes. Giving up is basically when you have control over something and you just don't do it, right? So I want to get healthier, but I'm still going to eat crap every day and not exercise and stay up till midnight every day. So when we look at situations, especially when it involves other people, when we talk about acceptance, it doesn't mean accepting what's wrong or accepting that they're just the way they are and that's okay. It's accepting that they can't change necessarily, or they're maybe not going to change for you. So your job as a what can you do to take action is your choices and your perceptions, your capacity to have a different response, right? Or have a different expectation. Any questions about that? I see that I'm getting close to the end of my time, and normally I spend a lot more time on that, but you are going to be getting a handout later on this afternoon or tomorrow that will explain this a little bit more in detail. But this is probably one of my favorite stress management tools, and I use it on a regular basis. So even if you just have the thought process, what can I do differently? What can I change? What can I do in this situation? Typically is where you feel the most power, right? So my slides aren't changing. What is that? So when we talk about reducing stress, mastery, you have to stay in that quadrant. So things you can do, your reactions and your responses to every situation. So taking control of yourself. Or accepting and letting go, accepting things or people the way they are, letting go of the expectations that it will change or that they will change. And this is really where we need to focus. Okay, so really focusing on yourself. And creating a healthy lifestyle are things that are really going to help with managing stress. We are not pleasant or very patient when we're tired, right? When we think about how important sleep is. Or we know that when you're physically active, that your body is almost used to feeling stressed and then releasing at the end of your workout. So you're going to respond to stress differently, and you're going to have an outlet. And eating habits are also very important, because remembering that our body will use what we eat to build itself and to use the energy that we give it. So if we give it healthy energy, whole foods, lots of colors, then we're going to have a little bit more healthy energy. Or if we give it sort of processed things and high fat, high salt, high sugar things, then our body's going to respond to that as well, and not usually in a positive way, right? So when we talk about sleep, we want to have a regular sleep routine. We want to turn our alarm clock away from view so we don't see it. Make your room dark, cool, and quiet. Remove all screens, all of them. Making sleep a priority, get regular exercise during the day, and not too close to bedtime, because that will keep you up. reduce caffeine and alcohol intake close to bedtime, have a comfortable mattress and pillow, and don't go to bed hungry or too full, right? It's okay to have a bedtime snack if you're feeling hungry. Find a relaxation exercise or a mental health exercise that'll help you. For some of us, we aren't necessarily aware of what these might be or what they might feel like. So I'm going to give you a tool. So I'm going to teach you how to be mindful and how to take a belly breath or a tactical breath, because this is something that you can incorporate into your day that might take a minute or two, that will help you, I'm going to say, give you more space in your fuse, or that'll just relax your body so that you can have more calm responses and thoughts. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, and I just want you to become aware of your breathing. I don't want you to change it. I just want you to become aware of it. And really focus on how you feel your breath, where you feel your breath coming from. Is it warm or is it cold? And as you focus on your breath, you're going to have other thoughts that are going to come in and out of your head. And that's okay. I'm just going to ask you to, when they come in, acknowledge, and then send it away. And then focus back on your breathing. Now keep focusing on your breathing, and I'm going to give you instructions on how to have a belly breath, and then we're going to do it together. So belly breathing is really when you expand your diaphragm, right? Your belly expands and your rib cage expands, your lungs expand to the side, not up, sideways, and you have a big breath, but you have to hold on to it for 4 seconds, and then you let go of it slowly for 4 seconds. So when you're ready, let's do this together. Take a deep breath in for 4, 3, 2, and 1. Hold. 3, 2, 1. Exhale slowly. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Go back to breathing normally and just become aware of maybe the tension in your shoulders, or if there's any more tension in your abdominals. If there's any thoughts that you need to dismiss, right? Focus on your breathing. All right, so again, take a deep breath in, expand your diaphragm, so push against the waist of your pants. Take a deep breath in, hold. 3, 2, 1. Exhale slowly. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Good. Go back to breathing normally. Take an inventory on where there's a little bit more tension left. And this last breath, I want you to inhale that you're inhaling all the energy that you need for the next few hours of your workday. And then as you exhale, I want you to think about relaxing your whole body. Okay, take a deep breath in for 4, 3, 2, and 1. Expand, expand. 2 and 1. Exhale slowly. 4, 3, 2, and 1. And that is a mental health exercise. You have calmed your mind and calmed your body. And sometimes all we need is 2 minutes, not even, that was maybe a minute and a half, of a calm moment, a quiet moment, something to think about. And it could be one thing. So when you were thinking about your breath, you were being mindful, you were being in the moment with your breath. And when you're breathing deeply, you were doing an abdominal breath that ignites the relaxation response. So if you feel like some of that spoke to you and you feel like maybe you're in the orange or the red, or you know someone who is and you need some resources, please either take a picture or a screenshot or whatever with these resources. And as you know, this is being recorded, so I will send you the link in your email. If you didn't get the last email, I used the emails that were given for the registration form. So if you didn't receive last week's email, please email me directly. I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and you can email me directly, and I will be sending CFMWS. I will be emailing directly the link to the YouTube page that this is going to be sent to. Okay. If you want to follow us on social media, these are our 3 ways that you can contact us. Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We have lots of information there. And if you need to contact us or whatever, then you are welcome to email healthpromotionncr@cfmws.com. So I hope that please send me an email, or I can, I don't know, I can put the link in the chat box at the end, but please send me an email and I can send you that if you didn't receive it last week. Otherwise, I will be resending it to the people who have received it. So class 3 is not canceled. All classes next week is Tuesday. Tuesday. And then the week after that on the 16th, and then the week after that on the 23rd. So we have 2 more weeks after this. So I hope to see you then. And if you have any questions, I will stay back. And if you want to throw things in the chat, you're welcome to do that. I am now just going to stop the recording.